There we go. Okay, we see it. Okay, this is Karen with the Central Coast Water Board, and welcome to this April Fool's Day presentation on the Central Coast Ambient Monitoring Program. The green area on the California map is the Central Coast region. It's a really choice part of California coastline. That our Central Coast Ambient Monitoring Program is responsible for monitoring and assessing this large area. It's about 300 miles of coastline. In the pictures on this screen, you can see the CCAMP team. We are not a large group. This is all of us, plus an occasional extra field staff. Mary Adams is responsible for all of our day-to-day management of our monitoring activities. But Erin does virtually all of our field team work. She's the team lead and has been with us for quite some time now. Has had her hands on many of the samples we've collected. This is Dave Parodies, who has done all of the software development you'll see today, and myself. I'm the program manager. In our Central Coast region, we developed a vision. It's pretty simple: healthy watersheds. And in order to ensure that we have healthy watersheds, we've set up several goals, which basically the first one's associated with healthy aquatic habitat. The second is proper watershed function. And the third is about clean groundwater. And in all cases, we recognize that in some areas of our region we have problems. So we are hoping that we can show positive trends in those areas and by the year 2025. So for our monitoring program, it's been very important that we set up a program that's able to show trends over time so that we can help address these goals. Our program has primarily been focused on monitoring for the first goal, though, as opposed to watershed function and groundwater, but I'll talk in a bit at the end of the presentation on how we're beginning to address those other goals. I'm going to do an overview of our program, general overview. For those of you who are very familiar with CCAMP, I apologize for the redundancy. But then I'll be talking about how we've made use of our data over the years, how we've integrated data from multiple sources. You get to be here for the premiere viewing of our new website today, and then finally addressing our goals. Up front, I want to let you all know that coordination with other programs has been a huge priority for us. There are several, first of all, the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary has been an important partner for us, but there have been several other monitoring programs that we've worked with closely. Probably one of the most important is the Central Coast Water Quality Preservation, Inc., which is the nonprofit that runs the cooperative monitoring program for agriculture. And the data you see today will be our data in combination with their data on the website. Also, the City of Salinas is our only Phase 1 stormwater program at this point, and they have a monitoring program that's integrated with ours and with CCWQPs. The Central Coast Long-Term Environmental Assessment Network is a regionalized marine monitoring effort undertaken by some of our marine discharges in the Monterey area. And then there are a number of local agency, volunteer, and university programs with whom we've worked for many years and whose data we have worked with extensively. There are two main program components to CCAMP. One is a watershed rotation component, and the other is our coastal confluences monitoring. The watershed rotation is basically set up where we rotate through 5 watershed areas. The first is the Pajaro and North Coast, which includes the Santa Cruz area coastline, the larger Pajaro watershed, which has a lot of agriculture, and the city of Watsonville, Gilroy, and Hollister. The large Salinas watershed, This is the salad bowl of the nation. Also, the city of Salinas is located in the lower end of this watershed. The relatively pristine Carmel, Big Sur watersheds along the coast, and then San Luis Obispo County areas. The fourth rotational area is the Santa Maria watershed, another extremely important agricultural area with the city of Santa Maria at the lower end. And then several watersheds in the south coast, including San Antonio and San Ynez, which have a lot of vineyard activity, and then the south coast, where we find the city of Santa Barbara and quite some heavy urbanization, as well as some nursery and greenhouse activities. You can see here our rotational schedule. We completed 2 full rotations in 2009 with the Big Sur coastline. We are waiting 1 year to start our 2011 rotation because of some budgeting considerations. In each of these rotational areas, we typically put 30 monitoring sites. We come back to those sites each time we come back around. And when we are in that rotational area, we visit those sites once a month. Let's see, I guess I'll click this. Joanna, I'm not sure what that meant, but perhaps I'll find out. Another program component is our coastal confluences monitoring. That is more of a trend-oriented monitoring program where we keep ongoing sampling at the lower ends of our creek and river mouths. This allows us to keep basically tabs on our watersheds when we're not, when we're between rotational monitoring. In addition, these sites have been important coordinating locations with other programs. We're able to estimate loading to the ocean using these locations. We've coordinated quite a bit with the CCAMP program, have developed flow estimates for these sites that they have used for load estimates. And there's a new swamp program called the Stream Pollution Trends Monitoring Program, or SPOT, which is looking at sediment toxicity and chemistry at some of these locations. And so we're collaborating with that program. We've had ongoing trend monitoring at these sites since about 2001, minus about a 2-year break for funding problems. So the monthly monitoring is basically conventional monitoring for nutrients, salts, pathogen indicators, flow, and basic probe measurements. At a subset of our sites, we also collect benthic invertebrate data and habitat data. That hasn't been comprehensive at all of our sites, but we've managed to sample at about 100 sites throughout the region. But there are several other important bioassessment efforts by some of the other programs that I mentioned earlier, including our statewide surface water ambient monitoring program. We also collect toxicity data at a subset of our sites for both water and sediment toxicity. The water sampling is for a fish, alga, and invertebrate species, and the sediment sampling is for invertebrate only. There's quite a bit of other toxicity data that's been collected in the region, particularly through the Cooperative Monitoring Program for Agriculture. I'll be talking about that in a bit. But also, we've had quite a bit of research through the Granite Canyon Marine Laboratories, which is UC Davis, the SWAMP program, and other sources. As I mentioned, detecting change has been an important consideration in the way we set our program up. And right now we're getting to a point where we're able to do that. We have enough data to begin to see some changes in different locations throughout our region. As you know, the more data you have, the more power you have to detect statistical change. So one of the new features of our website is incorporating that in our assessment tools. This is just an example of some of the trend monitoring data that we collect over the years. Don't forget that this is monthly data, so you'll see a lot of variability in concentrations because during the winter, sometimes a pollutant might be diluted and then more concentrated in the summer. Nevertheless, in this case, you can see this is ammonia and nitrate in the Santa Maria River mouth. The red lines represent our basin plan objectives for these parameters. You can see in these cases we're seeing some increasing concentrations. In ammonia, for example, there were only a few exceedances of the standard before about 2004. And again, we're seeing some increases in nitrate concentrations as well. Prior to about 2004, we rarely had exceedances of 30 milligrams per liter, which is already threefold the drinking water standard. So we have some severe nitrate problems in this watershed and some other watersheds that so far we are not getting a handle on. This is the Lower Santa Maria watershed. I'm just showing this to give you a perspective on how our monitoring works. The site at the downstream end of the watershed is the Coastal Confluence trend monitoring site. That was the data I just showed you. The rest of these sites are either ag sites or our own CCAMP rotational sites. So in many of these cases, we'll only sample these sites once every 5 years. So I'm going to show you the data from these two sites next. Oh, by the way, you can see these green sites are coming in from upstream. These don't have a nitrate problem. The nitrate problem in this watershed is entirely in this lower basin. Here's the data from those two sites sampled on rotation. So you can see the first time we monitored was 1999. Again, some exceedances of the drinking water standard, but most of the data fell under that concentration, whereas in our second rotation we had quite a bit of higher concentrations measured. One thing I will mention is this is concentration data. We also measure flowed, and in some cases, flows may decrease. We have been in a drought. Sometimes the tailwater discharges may diminish, which may result in a reduced loading to the watershed, but concentrations may actually increase as a result. So you can't just interpret concentration data in a vacuum. That's our basic program that I just summarized. There are other projects we're involved in, but not as routine monitoring, just because of our resources. We do a lot of partnering with and agencies, sometimes helping them to get funding or supporting them in whatever way we can. A couple of examples, we've been doing some work on some endocrine disruption issues in our region. For example, the San Luis Obispo Science and Ecosystem Alliance, FLOC, has been finding really quite elevated levels of nonylphenol phenol in Morro Bay and in other water bodies, not just in our region but throughout the state. And they've been showing in Morro Bay some fairly high levels of, let's say, tissue disruption, gonadal tissue disruption in aerogobies, and also some liver problems. So they're looking into whether that is as a result of nonylphenol. Interestingly, just came out with recent information looking at they've been looking at septic and sewage discharges and have actually found very high levels of this chemical in toilet paper. Scott's the best brand, by the way. There's been a Proposition 13 study done by CCLean and Cal Fish and Game and UC Davis in our region looking at chemistry and sea otter tissue, particularly their livers, where we have seen relatively elevated levels of PBDE, which is another endocrine disruptor and emerging chemical of concern. And the CCLean program is also now using bioassays in their wastewater program, their monitoring program, to see if they're seeing any direct endocrine disruption from their effluent, which they are not so far from their initial work. In terms of pathogen work, there's been a lot of work done in our area on pathogen problems in sea otter, the sea otter population. Central Coast region is almost entirely responsible for sea otters, and there have been a number of pathogens, both bacterial and protozoal, that are typically associated with humans and domestic animals. And we've assisted those epidemiological studies by helping them understand freshwater influences from the watersheds when they're examining the various potential risk factors associated with sea otter deaths. We're also looking at E. coli 0157 in our Central Coast watersheds. You may remember several years ago there was an outbreak that caused a spinach scare in the Salinas Valley, and we've been following up on that, looking at our coastal confluences to determine how widespread that organism is in Central Coast watersheds. Finally, there's a lot of work going on toxic algae right now in our region. This jar of green slime is actually a water sample direct from Pinto Lake in Watsonville area. There's work being done by City of Watsonville, Fish and Game. The sea otter, Fish and Game sea otter researchers are involved in this because we're starting to see sea otter mortalities in the area that may be related to the microcystin toxins that are also found in Pinto Lake. So there's investigations going on with regard to that issue. And in addition, we've been working with UC Santa Cruz researchers on relationships between the nutrient loading coming off of our major watersheds, like the Salinas watershed and Pajaro watershed, that moves highly nutrient-enriched water into Monterey Bay, and whether there's an association with some of the toxic phytoplankton blooms that they see going on out there. It's a complicated question because of the large amount of nutrients that are brought up from upwelling, but some preliminary evidence appears that there may be an association between the anthropogenic nutrient loading and some of these blooms that we're seeing. In terms of using data, on our website there are a number of reports and scientific articles that are either direct assessments of CCAMP data or related information. And we've done several hydrologic unit reports on our first rotation of data. We're moving away from those large reports and going more towards web analysis and using smaller scaled reporting as where we're going to move in terms of our written assessments in the future. But I wanted to point out one of the reports on that website because it's one of the reports that was a monitoring study that we did outside of our routine monitoring approach. This one looked at Central Coast Harbor conditions. It was set up as a probabilistic design, looking at water chemistry, sediment chemistry, toxicity, and looking at the infaunal community. And that report is on the website. Oh, it also looked at fish and mussel tissue chemistry as well. This table is a summary of the percent of the area of our various harbors that are estimated to have water, sediment, or tissue in good, fair, or poor condition. As an example, I'm going to point out Moss Landing Harbor, which is probably in the poorest condition of our harbors, with 33% of the water showing some problems and about half of the tissue and sediment area, or tissue samples and sediment area. This is a map of that harbor. In terms of the water quality index, there were high levels of nitrate and phosphorus in the southern arm of the harbor, as well as low water clarity. The upper arm was in better condition. And again, the sediment quality index for the harbor showed poor sediment condition in the southern harbor, both with toxicity and high levels of some of the organochlorine pesticides. I think I already alluded to our flow modeling we've done to help us understand pollutant loading to the coast. We developed a model of the flow for our coastal confluence sites by adapting USGS flow model that's available through the National Hydrography data set, and attaching it basically to more locally based stream gauges so that we could estimate daily flows, and then truth testing that model against our hand-measured data that we collect monthly at these sites. And that data has been used to help support CCLean stream loading estimates. It was used in the UC Santa Cruz work I alluded to, looking at algal bloom dynamics in the Monterey area. It's been used to help support the marine mammal epidemiology research I mentioned. And also, we've used it to help us understand which of the marine protected areas offshore our coastline are at most risk from chemical pollution. We've also used our data to take, not directly, to inform enforcement actions. This is an example where our staff noted a trail of broccoli departing a storm drain, and we're able to associate that with high toxicity, nutrients, and chlorine leaving that drain and entering the Salinas Reclamation Canal, and follow up on that did abate the discharge and result in a fine. Another sizable activity we've been involved in the last year or so was development of the 2010 303D, 305B integrated report. I'm going to back up a bit and describe what this is for those of you who aren't familiar with it. Section 303D is the section of the Clean Water Act that requires us to develop a list of impaired waters. And Section 305B is the section that requires us to report on the condition of all of our waters. EPA required us to combine those into a single integrated report. And that report basically, well, I'm just going to skip. That report requires us to analyze all available data and look at it for exceedances of various standards and criteria. And in the process of doing this, you develop what are called lines of evidence, which are specific for a particular pollutant, a particular beneficial use, a particular water body. So there are an amazing number of possible combinations when you have a robust data set in a lot of water bodies. So basically, we developed an electronic approach to help us scan our data to develop a very comprehensive report for our region that resulted in over 10,000 lines of evidence that we combined into 3,700 decisions on the state of our region's waters. This effort required us to take 18 different data sources and combine them into a single format. So a lot of those collaborators I was mentioning earlier, we've worked with their data to quality check that data, put it into a single data format, and then scan it using our electronic tools that our friend Dave Parady's developed for us. Here's a summary of the top 10 pollutant listings. There are a number of other pollutants that we did look at, but the top 10 are listed here with the most number of listings for fecal coliform, but also quite a few listings for example, nitrate, toxicity, turbidity, and ionized ammonia. So many of these are new listings to our region. And what happens when a water body is listed as impaired is then staff will evaluate whether a TMDL needs to be developed for that water body. And this is a map of the proposed 2010 nitrate listings in our region. This is the lower Pajaro, the Salinas, and tributary watersheds. Let's see, we have San Luis Obispo Creek. This is the lower Santa Maria River and Oso Flaco area. This is Santa Ynez, low wastewater discharge, and a few small drainages in Santa Barbara. This is the map of toxicity listings. You'll notice a fairly similar pattern here, but we do have, oops, I guess we won't look at that in more detail. Sorry. Going on, we have quite a lot of data at this point, which gives us quite a bit of power to evaluate, for example, some of our basin plan objectives to determine if they are appropriate for our region. And in the case of pH, it's our opinion that the basin plan objectives may be a bit low given our Central Coast geology, where we tend to see relatively high pH even in pristine waters. You can see the red lines here are the objectives for recreation, agriculture, and domestic supply, quite low relative to our pH conditions. Aquatic life is from 7 to 8.5. That's a bit better, but still a little low relative to the average condition in our region. So this is an example of data that probably should support at least an evaluation of our basin plan objectives for pH. Another thing we've used our data for recently is developing a guideline criteria for nitrate to protect for aquatic life. The drinking water standard at 10 as nitrogen is not protective of aquatic life in our stream systems, and we see algal blooms and eutrophication at far lower nitrate concentrations than 10. We evaluated our data by first defining a reference pool of data by looking at all of the sites in our region where we never saw violations of our dissolved oxygen standards. When you have a eutrophied system, you will start seeing widely ranging or depressed oxygen values. So by looking at the characteristics of our sites that showed high quality oxygen characteristics, as well as we looked to see other secondary indicators like the presence of excessive algal growth. So we developed a reference pool and then used a new modeling approach that Tetra Tech developed called the nutrient numeric endpoint approach to evaluate our data to establish a guideline value for nitrate, which we've currently set at 1 milligram per liter to protect for aquatic life uses. And that's currently under peer review to be developed as a swamp publication, but the technical report is available on our website. We've used our data in quite a number of other applications, TMDL development and monitoring. We used it to help us inform us in monitoring program design for the original cooperative monitoring program for agriculture. It's used to make regulatory decisions associated with effluent discharges in the region. We've used it to make decisions about how to prioritize our watersheds for grants funding, where and what kinds of BMPs to implement, and how to evaluate our regulatory actions for effectiveness. And it's also been used actually out in the field by technical service providers. Our website has been used to help interact with agricultural growers at a field scale. Okay, now I'm going to talk about integrating data. How do we pull data together? Since that's been a really important challenge for us, because we wanted to make use of data collected by a number of different sources in our region, our ag program, the grants programs, and other volunteer efforts and so forth. So some time ago, a small grant was provided through the Non-Point Source program to the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary to help take the data upload system we already had developed for our ag data and to help implement it for volunteers. And that system is called CalDucks, Getting Our Ducks in a Row. And I want to thank the sanctuary and several volunteer programs that have helped work with us on this system. And let's see, I have a list here. Basically, the system does online checking for errors and format issues that helps us prepare the files to go into the SWAMP CDIN system to use for our 3D scanning tools. That's how we are able to scan our data for the developing the integrated report and for use in the CCAMP website, Getting Our Ducks in a Row. And I'm going to take you there and run you quickly through this tool. This is our old CCAMP website front end. This is going to be changing soon, but you can get to the data delivery page right here. And basically, if you're interested in looking at this further, you can sign on as a guest. And this system also has, I think it looks like we're going to get some additional funding through the SWAMP program to hopefully expand the use of this system for broader statewide uses for grants and other data sources. So I just logged in as a guest, and I'm going to just really quickly show you some of the features of this system. You can, basically, there's a lot of help built into the system. There's really no manual. Well, there is a manual, but you should be able to find all the help you need in the system itself. You register your project by providing some basic contact information and information about the project. And probably the most important part about this is it asks you to answer questions about the types of data you collect, whether you collect robust sort of SWAMP grade quality assurance data, or whether you have a simpler program that you collect less data and need a simpler template for. So it uses the answers to these questions to provide you with a template. We have 3 different templates of varying complexity. And you also talk about what types of data you collect here, and then you can tell it that you want to inform somebody when you deliver the data. So, for example, for our ag program, we're interested to know when the data is delivered to us in terms of our permitting requirements. So the system will email interested parties as to when the data is delivered. So you set your project up, and then based on your answers to the project registration questions, you get a suite of templates that you're going to use to deliver your data. This is sort of the minimum suite, which would require you to deliver a description of your sites, the sites that you monitor out, including latitude and longitude, your water quality data itself, maybe some information on equipment calibration if you collect that data. So, for example, a site's file includes a number of fields, some of which are required, some of which aren't. If you get the template for that data, the columns that are shaded green are required fields. So this would basically, you would define your site name and location and send that in to us. Okay, so you get your templates here. You can upload, once you've filled them out, you can upload them to the data checker here. Then you start file validation, and basically that sends the files to the data checker and validates it against all of our standard terminology. And it returns file validation results. It'll email you and let you know when it's done, and then it returns file validation. And it will tell you if you have errors in your file. So, for example, here it found 187 errors in this site file, and you can click on this and find out what the issue was. So, for example, here under site tag, it couldn't find that name in its master table. So it's looking for site tags that it recognizes and that it has documented. Okay. So after you fix the errors, you can come and say you want to submit a data file as a final file to the system. Once you've cleared the errors, you can say you're preparing it for final delivery, and then you deliver those files here and send those to us. And that's basically how the system works, and it's enabled us to manage a huge amount of data from our Cooperative Monitoring Program for Agriculture. They have been definitely the guinea pigs on this system, but we've also had a lot of help, as I mentioned, from the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary in terms of getting that volunteer program going and helping us debug the system. And we're hoping, again, like I said, just got notified about a week ago that additional funding may be available to enhance this system for grants data statewide. Okay. Back to viewing data. Next, I'm going to take you to our brand new website, premiering today. It may go offline tomorrow, depending on how this goes. And we're hoping that this isn't an April Fool's Day joke on ourselves, but we're actually very excited about it. We've had a website up since 2000, but this one has greatly improved its capability and the online viewing tools. And there are improvements being made. We have some things that are in progress that we took offline today because they didn't quite work yet, but I want to show you what we have so far. Right now it's accessible here through the new CCAMP data browser. If that button goes away tomorrow, you'll know why. Okay, so we've used Google Maps basis here. You can see these little blue dots are just all of the sites that we have monitoring data for. Over here, there's a monitoring programs button. Right now, it allows you to look at either CCAMP or CCAMP and irrigated ag data. At some point, we would also like to load all of the data that we have used for 303D listing. So that's the data from other programs that we've had a chance to really look through and put into our own format. We haven't done that yet. On the left is a watersheds list. I'm using the term watersheds loosely here. These are actually hydrologic units, which is a federal definition. In some cases, these are true watersheds. In other cases, they're collections of small watersheds, like Big Sur, as an example, has many small watersheds. But we use it as a way to navigate to smaller geographic areas and to subset the water body and sites list. So for right now, I'm just going to look at the Central Coast region, zoom in a notch. And then you go select a monitoring type. Right now, we have a selection for report cards. That is going to be developing. We have sort of an initial look at that I'll show you. But we're working on building some water quality indices to put into here to help basically score our region in a real simple way that's easy for the viewer to understand. That's also going to probably show up at the very initial screen when the website first comes up. Basic water quality is just the conventional parameters that I've mentioned earlier. And then toxicity are the two menus for which we have robust data available. We intend to also put up a screen for our bioassessment data soon. That's just one of the ones that's still in the works. And hopefully at some point in the future we'll be able to also have ability to look at things like sediment and tissue chemistry. So I'm going to start with basic water quality. When you click on that, you get an analytes list. These are the things that we sample for. Actually, I sample for a few more things than this, but these are the things we have available right now. You can see it's a pretty broad suite of analytes, which works really well if you know something about water quality. If you don't, I think you'll find the report card type approach a little easier to understand. But I'm going to use nitrate, which is my favorite parameter, probably because we have clear objectives for it, for our region, or actually for the state, the drinking water standard, and we have a very serious problem with it in the region. So I'm going to click on nitrate, and you can see that the sites have turned colors, and you immediately get an impression of where things are not so good and where they're quite good. And what you're seeing here, the Santa Cruz, North Coast, the Big Sur area, some of the upper watersheds are in good condition, and many of these lower watersheds, particularly the lower Salinas, Pajaro, Santa Maria, and some of these smaller watersheds have got a serious nitrate problem. What you also see is a bar chart of nitrate averages. These are organized by hydrologic unit at this point. These will be rollovers at some point, so you'll actually be able to see the name, but right now there's also an associated table that gives you lets you, for example, 307 Carmel. Looks like there's no data there, but in fact there is data there. It's just dwarfed by the incredibly high levels we see in Salinas and Santa Maria watersheds. To address this dwarfing problem, in our chart options we have, this is what's called a linear chart scale. You can select a log chart scale, which changes your ability to view the lower end of the data. So you can see here that the average concentration in the Carmel was under 0.1 milligram per liter. That's what we expect in pristine watersheds. That's pretty normal for pristine watersheds, like the Big Sur area. Up here in Santa Maria and Salinas, these values are extremely high. And you can see that on average, they're quite a bit over the drinking water standard. Now, when I say on average, I need to qualify. These sites aren't selected randomly. They're typically at the bottoms of tributaries and along the main stem. So we don't have random, in creating an average, we're just looking at the bottom tributary concentrations as well as the main stem. All right, so if we want to go in and view the data in more detail, we might, for example, want to look at the Pajaro watershed. You can see it averages under the drinking water standard. Here it is with a minimum of 0.006, but a pretty high maximum of 829 samples. I can go back here to the watershed tool and select for that watershed, which is this one. Again, you can see these blue sites don't have any data in them. And what's come up is the sites list for all of the sites we've collected in this watershed. And very quickly allows you to see the ones that have very high average nitrate concentrations. If you go look at the water bodies list, you'll see only water bodies for the Pajaro watershed here. And if you go to the sites list, it's subsetted to just the Pajaro watershed. If I'd shown you that list before, it would have been much lengthier because it would have been for the entire region. Okay, so if you wanted to look at an individual site, there's a number of ways that you could get there. One is by going down to this table, and you can select a site on the table. For example, if you really wanted to look at, this 305 FUF, which is the worst site on average we have, you can click on it, and up comes a scatter plot of that data. You can see it typically averages over 20 milligrams per liter. This is a ag program site. You can tell our ag program sites because the program started in 2005, and no, I lied. This is one of our CCAMP sites, sorry. At any rate, so you can navigate to the site by clicking on the table. When you navigate to the site, the other way is by clicking on the chart here, the the list for monitoring sites. So for example, if I wanted to pick a different one, Yagas at Bloomfield, I can select that site. Here you can clearly see this is one of our rotational sites. It looks as though it may show some increases over time. But when you go down and look at the chart, I don't know if you've noticed, some of these icons are represented as arrows, and there are no arrows at this location, which means we haven't shown any significant, oh yeah, there's one, change. So you can actually use this chart to do a quick survey of all the water quality parameters at that location, and you can also use it to change to a different analyte. So for example, if I wanted to go look at fecal coliform, I could do that here, and the chart changes. So there's a couple of different ways you can navigate. Another way is through using the map. So I'm going to back out a bit so we can see the watershed more clearly. So if I wanted to, for example, I'm going to go back to find out what this site is that's dark red here. I can click on it. It's 306 WAC, Watsonville Creek, and yes, I want to go there. So that's another way to navigate to the site. And you can see that it zooms. Did you see that? Didn't you register? A little bug I just found. Sometimes we have to do what's called jiggling the switch. Okay, there's nitrate at that location. Just up from that site, you can see there's a site that's represented as an upward pointing arrow. And that means at that location, we have detected change. And I'm going to click on that site. That's 305 PJP, and we're going to go to that site now. There's the nitrate data for that location. You can see that before about 2005, we had virtually no exceedance, we did have no exceedance of the drinking water standards, whereas after that time, we had quite a few. If you go down and look at the site statistics here, you can see that the program did detect a significant change before and after 2005. So when it divides the data before and after the year 2005, the two data groups are significantly different from each other, and the averages, the means of those two groups are different by 42.8%. Now, one thing I haven't explained is how the sites get colored. And this little question mark leads you to more information on any of the analytes that I'm talking about here. So if you click on it, you get a whole lot more information about the analyte, in this case nitrate. It describes why we care about it, what we, why the standards are set, where they're set, gives you a few references for the information. And then at the bottom is what we're calling our rules. We've set up rules for all of our analytes that describe how the sites are colored. And these are a little bit complicated if you haven't worked with data a lot. So when I say, for example, if the 90th percentile is less than 1, what that means is that 90% of the data falls under that value, or 10% of the data falls over that value. So that would be what a green site would be. A yellow site would be one where 90% of the data falls under 10, the drinking water standard, and only 10% of the data exceeds 10. So that's basically how these rules work. And they're slightly different for all of the analytes because the analytes behave differently and have different characteristics. For example, some are pollutants, and you're very concerned if you have any exceedance at all, for example, toxicity. And some are natural parameters that you would find naturally, for example, salts. That's how the sites are colored, and in the case of this site, it actually changed from a site that was colored yellow in this time period to a site that was colored red in this time period. Okay, I could go on talking about this for quite some time, and I'm running out of time here. We have a number of applications we're developing. I'm going to back out. I turned on populated areas, irrigated agricultural areas, where agricultural pesticides are applied. This is going to be developed in more detail so you can actually look at the pounds applied above any monitoring site. We have that work done but not checked yet, so it'll be coming soon. We're working on a summary of groundwater data underneath our monitoring sites that will show where we're showing we have groundwater problems under monitoring sites. It's taking a minute to come up. So I guess you just need to stay tuned on this website. It's going to be developing, and we're really excited about where it's going. I really need to finish up here, and maybe I should now, instead of going, I was going to talk just a bit about our vision project, but I think I'll quit at this point and see if there's any questions.
Tony, could you unmute?
Yeah, now it is all on mute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody there?
Unmute all. There it goes.
At any rate, if there's no questions, thank you very much.
Give it a second, Karen. The unmute takes a second to implement.
Okay, I won't hang up.
Hear me?
I hear somebody.
Hi, this is, we're all up at Region 5. We're all in the room, actually, literally green with envy.
I know, it's pretty nice stuff. You know, Dave's really done a tremendous job on this website, and it's really, over the last month, most of the work's been done over the last month, let's put it that way.
So I always ask people questions that make them have to speculate heavily, so I'm sorry, but I mean, how transferable, it seems like all this is kind of basic water quality tools, and the geographic version of it is just, you know, the standards and the water bodies. I mean, how transferable do you see this to other regions and the state, and, you know, what kind of, you know, ballpark, like if we had someone who could program good?
Yeah, I hear you. Oh, I'm going to let Dave answer that question. He can't wait to.
Okay.
All of the code in the upload system, as well as the presentation tools, I've designed it all to work statewide. The issue at hand is having folks to support the system. Region 3 isn't in a position to commit the staff resources to support the entire state, but the code has been written to support the entire state, and now we are seeing interest, you know, some possible resources to transfer this more closely into the SWAMP program and make these data browsers available to you guys as well.
Actually, Val just told us that she'd like to provide us with some staffing assistance to help. We're trying to institutionalize Dave's head, basically, try to figure out how to get some of the things that he's built for us into the sort of mainstream SWAMP system. So it looks like just as of last week, not only did we find out we had some funds to finish the grants uploading tool, but also possibly a warm body to work with us down here on it. So hopefully it's looking good. All of it depends on getting the data into the simple table formats I showed you for the data checker. That's what the website is. I think it's very transferable.
Right. So in
terms but I'll tell you one thing that's different about our data. Now, you all have similar data. We have a lot of data taken at single locations, whereas in some cases there's a single data collection. So it's not set up for trend detection, so some of the features won't work. You know, you can only look at trends if you have the data to show it. So but that's, you know, I think the idea of setting up rules for different kinds of parameters, I think that's totally doable, you know.
Yeah, so I mean, like, what does Region 3 put into supporting this data system for your region? Is it like?
We have our swamp budget. In the past, we've had about an extra $70,000 a year from our endowment. But this system, I'm sorry, that was our total budget. Our system is built by Dave, and
right.
And with basically, I help with the design work on it. And so that's our cost, which is very little at this point.
Those other numbers she was talking about are CCAMP's whole budget, not this system.
Yeah.
This system, we use sealing wax and baling wire to put it, although now it looks like we will get some additional support.
So now that the system's there, I mean, but getting the data and all the information into it, you spend about a PY a year for your size region or something like that?
Could you repeat that? A new what?
So now that, like, the infrastructure is built, getting the information into that infrastructure, you spend, like, I guess it's all kind of automated now, huh?
Yes.
Well, to a great extent. It's still a whole lot of work.
Right.
It still requires, when people upload to the system, there's a help desk function that needs to be fulfilled, but it's nowhere near a PY. And what we're talking with Mark Pranger and the folks at Moss Landing about transferring a version of this to them and having the Swamp Help Desk fulfill that role.
We have a question here in the lobby. For them.
This is from Chantel Royer to all attendees. When will this be available to other watersheds, and what is the timeline on that?
If you mean other watersheds, you mean the rest of the state. There is no timeline. I mean, this was not developed by state funds. It's a Region 3 product. So, but as I mentioned, we've had some good news from Val Connor saying she hopes to get us some state board resources to help figure out how to develop some of these products for a statewide use. But I can't put a timeline on that. It depends on when those become available and quite a lot of other things outside of our control.
Yeah, we just learned about those resources over the past few weeks. So we've already had an initial meeting with the folks from Moss Landing to plan this, but we don't have any calendars or schedules done yet.
The other thing is we will post the PowerPoint in a SWAMP website in the report tab. There is a webinar link. So this PowerPoint will be posted there.
Okay. If there are other questions, you can email me or contact me. My phone number is 805-549-3333. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. That was great.